Many Constant Worlds is a podcast following the meta-disjointed journey through the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. I am Kat, she, her, and I made curry.
I'm Taryn, he, they, and I have to smell that curry and know it's there and want it. I sit closer to it. Like, Kat has to look at it. She's facing it, but she's further away, and it's not fair.
This is how it works when you record a podcast in your house.
Yeah.
So...
Join our fucking Patreon so maybe we can record anywhere else. And I don't have to be next to the curry being driven wild by it through the whole recording because I don't get to eat it until we're done. I was forbidden. That's my motivation. That's my gift when this is over. If I'm good through the recording, I get the curry. Don't you tell our secrets.
I was just going to say, to be fair, had you tried to eat it before, we'd just be sniffling through all of this. Just like, because it's spicy.
I was just kidding anyways. You could have told our secrets.
So, before we get too deep into anything, given the nature of the world, I want to say one thing very, very explicitly. We will not tolerate any bigotry or bullshit, frankly. Rule of being around here is don't be a dick. We are already very critical of the things in Stephen King's books that are inappropriate, and were inappropriate regardless of how normal they may have been back in the 70s or the 80s. Sometimes they have a narrative purpose. Sometimes it doesn't feel as though they do. He is not free of that watchful eye of ours. We recognize that it's 2024 and some of this shit was written previously, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to at least address the fact that it was not an okay thing to say or do.
Humans are humans and it shouldn't have been okay back then.
Exactly. So I will just say bluntly, if you voted for Trump, this is probably not going to be a podcast for you. You already probably know that.
Yeah, if I haven't made it clear, I am trans, and I also have chronic illness, and rely on things like the ACA for my life. I probably would have died in the last few years if it weren't for the Affordable Care Act.
Exactly, and I am brown with a uterus, so if you voted for Trump, you did actively vote against our rights. We are not going to sugarcoat who we are. Stephen King's terribly political, and he doesn't sugarcoat who he is. These books are quite political at times. That is what this podcast is. Stephen King has several books that are currently banned, and we will continue to bring you this podcast as long as we are able to, because we enjoy books. We love books.
And as long as it's good for our mental health or okay for our mental health.
We hope everybody is safe. We love our lobsters. And if anybody needs help, I will find some resources and drop the links in the description.
Can we get cute pictures? Like dogs, cats, animals. Cute, nice animal pictures, GIFs. Not GIFs. That's not how that word works. You want to get me fucking mad. They're not graphics.
The most powered political statement is how you pronounce GIF. Obviously, by everything we just spent the last few minutes saying, we fully support content warnings and taking care of your own mental health. So here are the trigger warnings for this book and thus this episode.
Can you do it in one breath?
I can certainly try. Let's see. Alcoholism, violence, child abuse, racial slurs, domestic abuse, murder, blood addiction, physical abuse, death, gore, racism, emotional abuse, mental illness, death of a parent, confinement, toxic relationship, body horror, sexism, sexual content, suicidal thoughts, fire. Nope, I can't.
That's okay.
I ran out at fire.
That's okay. We just have to do... We're doing things, we're just trying to make things fun again.
Gaslighting, grief, car accident, homophobia, ableism, child death, torture, pedophilia, sexual assault, sexual violence, body shaming, stalking, and animal death. Woo! So basically, if anything really does bother you, it's probably in this book. If it's all kind of mild, you might be fine, but this is a heavy book.
I have to say, like, you and I had a private conversation where I said books don't really scare me. There were a couple moments where I had a little bit of anxiety as I was listening to the end of this book. I'm really impressed.
Yeah.
I want to say before you embark on your summary, I will just put it out there. This is my favorite so far. This is the best one that we've read, I think. Yeah. I'm so impressed.
Yeah.
So
we finally hit one.
Yeah.
And you know what's great about that is this is like one of his earlier things.
Yeah.
And I do wonder how much that impacts the fact that this is such quality.
I think you're right.
So, we read part 5 of The Shining. This is basically the end of the book. And I'm going to tell you what it's about. It's time for the thrilling conclusion of The Shining. The story is told toggling back and forth between Halloran and the Torrances. Dick Halloran gets Danny's message, starts doing everything he can to get from Florida to the Overlook. He gets out of work, misses his plane, catches another, rents a car, nearly dies from driving in the snow, meets a shining plow driver who gives him the...
like a shiny Pokemon. Meets a shiny tow truck driver.
Who gives him the name of who to get a snowmobile from in Sidewinder and guns it for the hotel. Of course, it's never that simple. So while he is taking the snowmobile up, the damn hedge lion tries to stop him. But Dick is quick and uses the spare gas to set the thing on fire. Then upon arrival at the hotel, the other hedge animals are blocking the path inside because Jack has been consumed and he is hunting his family. Part of the challenge is that, as with all the endings of King's novels that we've read to this point, there's a storm. And the world is growing dim. Dim like Flag and Tommy in the halls, dim like Walter, dim like the skies of Derry. So what is happening inside the Overlook? Well, Jack is enjoying a party long, long over. Wendy and Danny are hiding out in the caretaker's apartment listening to Jack partying with the ghosts. Those ghosts insist that he must take out his family, especially his son. Eventually, Wendy ventures out when Danny says it's clear to try and make them some food, which she does succeed at. However, she makes the mistake of stopping to check on a passed out Jack. Turns out he was just playing possum, and just like when he held court, he latched onto her ankle. Like the ball and chain he has always seen her as.
Yeah, I
loved that. Yeah. He attacks her. Danny ends up interfering as Jack shouts about how the hotel wants him because he's the awesome one, and they can't handle that. Eventually, Wendy does knock him out and she drags him into the pantry. Danny lifts his head over any bumps. Basically, Wendy figures her and Danny can eat stuff out of the freezer as needed, and Jack can be sustained by the items in the pantry until hopefully someone comes to check on them. However, things only last so long because Danny is a child and needs rest, and Jack does wake up raging and trying to guilt his 5-year-old into letting him out of said pantry so he can murder them.
So they can take their medicine.
Murder medicine. Red rum
medicine.
So,
it needs to be a brand of NyQuil. Take it like a man.
Wendy takes Danny back to the caretaker's apartment to get some sleep. Of course, nothing ever lasts. Jack angry eats Triscuits until Grady, the previous caretaker, basically lets him out of the pantry. Then Jack grabs up the, croquet mallet-esque thing. I don't know. They call it something else. It's not an axe, though. And goes after his family. Wendy did go to check when she'd heard Jack go quiet to try and assure herself that he was still locked up. He wasn't, obviously. He chases her back to the apartment. Danny is missing from the bed, and Wendy tries to escape Jack in the bathroom. When Halloran arrives, that is when Jack finally retreats from attacking Wendy. He tries to take down Halloran. Wendy tries to find Danny. Danny is drawn into the dimness where Tony is able to reach him again. Tony tells Danny that he has always been a part of him. Daniel Anthony Torrance. As Tony is talking to him, they do personify the hotel as it. And again, this is prior to it with a capital I. But we're seeing a lot of those seeds. Tony also tells Danny he will remember what Jack forgot. Anyways, after Jack attacks Dick, he goes after Danny. He does find his son, and Danny manages to reach Jack, the real one, that has been consumed by the Overlook deep down inside. In what is a really incredible moment in the book, Jack tells Danny to run and never forget how much he loves him. Danny refuses to go and tells Jack that it's almost over, and just as A reminder from, the Eyes of the Dragon, sometimes evil for no reason is blind. So who exactly does the dim cover with all these storms? Danny then tells it, as in I'm now using the term it, capital IT, because that is how they keep referring to the overlook inside of Jack. Danny tells it to smash its face in so it no longer looks like his father. It does, and when it's finished, it even says, masks off. No longer presenting the false face of Jack Torrance. Now Danny just has to remember what Jack forgot, that being the boiler. Once things are set in place to blow, Danny goes running, finds his mom and Dick, and they all get the fuck out of the hotel, which is blown sky high. They have to pile onto the snowmobile, the hedge animals are burning, and the hotel has a dark cloud rising from it and disappearing into the sky. Dick does stop by the shed to get blankets for Wendy and Danny, and the hotel tries one more time to get Danny, influencing Dick to kill them. Dick even picks up one of the mallets, but he manages to regain himself, shake off the intrusion, grab the blankets, and get the fuck out of there. They return to Sidewinder, and thanks to Jack's life insurance and the help of Al Shockley, Wendy is able to look towards taking care of her and her son, and the book ends with Danny catching a fish with Dick on one side and Wendy on the other.
Which is lovely.
Yes, I do love the ending of this book.
Oh, yeah.
Much better than the movie, and I still really enjoy the Kubrick movie. And I remembered that the ending was different, but I read this literally 20 years ago because I'm pretty positive I was like 16. Like, they're so separate entities, but this is so good.
The Kubrick movie is essentially an AU. They are so different.
Yeah, with some incredible performances, though. That is what sells it.
I can see why Stephen King hates that movie. They are just two different things. The Kubrick movie, and I'm sure we will talk about this when we watch it. Again, join our Patreon if you want to have that. What level is that at?
That is free. You just have to be following us. We have a time limit for how much airtime we get to upload, and I have to pay more every time I upload over that limit. So the movies have kind of moved over to Patreon, where I can upload as much as I want for free.
Well, and also, here's a little bit of how the sausage gets made. It's an incentive to see what we're doing over on Patreon.
Yeah.
Which, I still haven't gotten around to doing all that Twilight shit, but I've had a lot going on. Regardless, join us on Patreon when we go through The Shining. I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but the Kubrick movie feels like he decides to focus on Wendy as the main character.
Yeah.
It follows Wendy very closely with Danny and Jack as, supporting characters.
Here's the thing. We're also going to watch the miniseries. I have it on my shelf somewhere. I have it so we can watch both, because the miniseries, I'm of the impression, is much more accurate to the book, and I do believe Stephen King likes that one more.
I was going to say I've heard it's more accurate to the book, that Stephen King likes it, and I've also heard it's trash. Those
fair.
are the three things that I've heard about the miniseries.
It was aired on television. It looks, from the images, it looks kind of chintzy.
Yeah.
But, you know what? We're going to see. We're going to see how it goes, because I will say sometimes as much as I value an author going hey, I feel like you did not honor what I tried to write.
Yeah.
There are situations and there are some movies where it kind of preferred the other thing, because Willy Wonka's a great example.
Yeah.
I love Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I hate Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
That's a whole conversation for another day, because I think there's a lot of reasons why that is.
Gene Wilder.
Gene Wilder is one of them, but the other one being that Roald Dahl is trash.
Oh yeah, no, I don't like Roald Dahl in the first place.
He was a racist, every-ist piece of trash. He just happened to also write some good stories, but he was just a piece
that depends on your opinion.
Absolute trash.
Opinion of good stories. Just saying. I don't fucking like his writing, okay? That's it.
He still wrote the bones of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah.
And of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But we're not here for that, and I will lose my train of thought before we dive into the story here. Given that the way that the Overlook would have kept Danny would be for him to die.
Yeah.
Do you think then that Jake is a child that is kept because he dies, and that's how he flips over, and that's how he meets Roland, is through his death.
I mean, maybe, especially because, like, Stephen King has more than one story about an evil car.
Oh, yeah. I have... So, as we've talked about more than once, I listen to a lot of these books. So, as this book was ending, it moved into the beginning of Pet Sematary.
Oh.
And I didn't get to actually listen to the beginning of Pet, because it didn't start playing it. It just said, here's a recommendation based on things that you've already listened to that you might like. And all of my recommendations are going to be Stephen King, because it's most of my entire life has just become Stephen King now, because this is what we do. And it started playing a foreword by him. And we will talk about this more when we eventually read Pet Sematary. But it talked about... He was talking about how they had moved next to a very busy road.
Yeah.
And this terrifying moment when his toddler ran out into the road. That scarred him. He said that it scarred him. I think that he then saw how frightening roads and cars could be. Even before his accident that would happen later.
But his life has always been leading to... Because,
oh, yeah.
Like, the universe was trying to tell him.
Yes. And he knows that. And when we get to the final... Or it might be book 6, but when we get to the end of the Dark Tower, he's aware. He's very aware.
Well, and it's interesting that you talk about Pet Sematary, because that's the one that he says he can never reread.
Oh, yeah.
Because he
Too
just
scary.
can't
Yeah.
go back into that place. Which I think is really, like, fascinating. Because obviously we've also talked about the books that he doesn't remember writing, like Cujo. And now we have added into the mix, like, The Shining, where he didn't realize he was writing himself.
Yeah.
And then you have the books that Stephen King remembers well enough to know he can't read it again.
Yeah, I am interested to see moving forward when we see characters who shine, what happens when they die, or like this idea that these quote-unquote it forces, death, like taking these characters or not, like what happens with that. Because the fact that Jake dying brought him to Roland and Roland's quest, and then him dying again takes him out of it, but then later will bring him back in. Like, it's a weird, like...
Jesus. He's just Jesusing.
I do love the idea of Jake as Jesus.
So there's a moment in On Writing where he's talking about some author who was, like, doing some sort of allegory for Jesus, and they gave them a name with JC. Obviously...
Yeah, Jake Chambers.
You know,
yeah.
And I feel like he is such a hypocrite through that book anyway, where he does the things that he says he doesn't approve of. And it wasn't even like he was saying, oh, I don't approve of this. He just, he was discussing it, if I remember correctly. So, of course, yes, I know you've made the joke as well, like, yeah, Jake Chambers, JC, and because he dies and comes back the way that he does... And it is through his sacrifice that Roland is able to proceed with his quest. And we know that religious women play a factor in Stephen King's stories. I don't feel like... I don't even feel like it's speculation. It just almost feels like, no, of course he's supposed to be the Jesus figure.
So he doesn't just die, but if we look at Roland as his father... And Roland is the last of the white. He is the good. We can argue about whether or not Roland is good, but he is meant to represent goodness.
Yeah.
And he has to sacrifice Jake to further the path of goodness. He has to sacrifice Jake to further, like, goodness, right?
Yeah.
And to, like, save... Because him getting to the Dark Tower saves the Dark Tower, which saves not even just the universe, but all universes. And that requires the sacrifice of Jake, and it requires the sacrifices of Roland. So, which also is another, that's why the line in the Bible is like, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. That's right, I know the Bible. I was raised in that shit. I don't just talk shit on Christians. I had to break the seriousness of that moment because I could not handle it.
No, we're millennials and we can't handle like serious things. They make us uncomfortable, and generally it means we have to make fun of ourselves. Yes. Just saying.
Yes, self-deprecation is the best kind of occasion.
That is how we cope. I guess let's really get into The Shining as a whole here. We have now read the entire thing, and it does sound like we're both on the same page of this. This was a really well done book. Of all the things we've read, it is probably of the best quality to date.
Oh, yeah.
I do feel like there are pieces of what he's going to end up going on to do later because of the way they keep referring to the Overlook as it. It. Obviously, Dick Halloran is in it.
So I also caught the whole it bit, and then the fact that at the end, it's all the wasps and the hornets.
Yes.
And that imagery. Mm-hmm. And then in it, I think there's some of that as well, but then it's like, it's a spider.
Yes.
So we know, and we can add to our, like, murder board of evil that this, like, whatever this demon is, like, when it uses the line, "We are legion," it's some kind of insectoid.
Yeah.
Or at least it presents as insectoid.
It's at the very least a dark cloud, a dark miasma that just kind of settles into a place and exists. Because obviously, yeah, in it is a giant spider, but at the same time, you have things like the deadlights. Very specifically, like the deadlights in particular are kind of a weird, like...
I mean, but the deadlights, I mean, they're hypnotizing, are they not?
Yeah.
So you have insects like fireflies that use that. Like, I'm very much stuck on this idea that they're insects, which I think I'm stuck on it because insects are almost alien to us. They're so different.
And you got the mist, which was giant bug.
I'm getting to the mist. Because in what we have read of that book to this point, what does Flag tell him? Size. Size is what gets us. We rule over. There are more insects in the world, exponential degrees.
Like lobsters.
Lobsters are insects.
Yes, I'm not joking. Like, legitimately, lobsters are insects.
Yeah, when you're eating lobsters, you're just eating bugs of the ocean.
Big bugs.
Big old bugs.
Yeah, they are. Think about that. I try not to, but legitimately how big those bugs are.
Enjoy your bug meat. Enjoy your expensive ass bug meat.
There's also, a reason it used to be a poor person
I still
thing.
Really do want to come to Maine. Anyways, the size, like, if insects were bigger, we would be fucked.
Yes.
We would be completely screwed.
Fuck, sometimes if they're small enough and they bite you, you still screwed.
Yes, it is the size. Like, size will get you. And I think the mist is such a great example of that, because really, the insects weren't, like, they had some things that were different about them, but overall, they were just big.
Yeah.
They were just bigger. They were coming through a portal with this mist from some place where they were bigger.
Kaiju bugs.
Yes, kaiju bugs. And we are kaiju to insects.
We are kaiju to insects.
But think about like ants.
Yeah.
Ants that can lift. Ants lift, bro. Like, think about that shit. Now make them huge.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Like, that is terrifying.
It is.
That's fucking terrifying.
That's why I can't think about lobsters too much, like, about them as being insects.
Yeah. And they'll fucking pinch you and shit. And it will hurt.
Well, aren't there, like, sea spiders?
Yes.
which is also horrifying.
Yeah, I don't know if they're actual spiders, but they sure as fuck look like them.
They look like them.
They got little spindly... We don't know everything that's in the ocean. Like, don't even get me started on the fucking ocean.
I mean,
like,
I've been on this tirade before.
I don't know if we've made it clear, but we'll say it again. Kat has thalassophobia.
Pretty much. I actually, for our on writing episode, my story is a thalassophobia story.
Yeah, I'm not shocked.
That's on our Patreon. Not yet, but it will be.
I have... What's the opposite of thalassophobia?
I don't know.
When you love the ocean. When you're sexually, like, attracted to the ocean. I'd have sex with the ocean. Not, like, everything in it, but, like, just, like, the water itself. I don't know how you could do that.
It sounds like a Chuck Tingle novel.
I know! That's the joke I'm going for.
So, I mean, I think we have to ask Chuck Tingle. What is this
Chuck
called?
Tingle, make this funny. Or make this sexy. I don't know. Help me.
How I fucked the ocean.
No. How the ocean fucked me.
And a dinosaur.
You don't ever do the fucking when it comes to Chuck Tingle. Like, you are railed by.
I actually do believe that Chuck Tingle recently wrote a, like, horror comedy.
Yes. Yeah.
Camp Damascus?
I'm not sure with Camp Damascus. I know there's Bury Your Gays.
Oh, maybe. Chuck Tingle branching out. Go Chuck Tingle.
Maybe I'm wrong then. But I could swear Bury Your Gays is a horror. But...
Anyways.
We'll look into it. We will look into it.
Chuck Tingle aside, like the furries.
I will make Kat post, like, when this goes up or something. I'll make Kat, like, link or write about it or something, since we're mentioning it. The actual Chuck Tingle stuff. Because they are an icon.
Anyways.
Railed in the ass by our podcast mentioning Chuck Tingle. Like... railed in the ass by the mention of Chuck Tingle on our podcast.
What's hilarious to me about that is the idea that Chuck Tingle would go make more money off of our podcast than we did.
I think they'd share it. They seem anti-capitalist. Like, they're exploiting the economy, and that's amazing, but, like...
We love good, like, anti-capitalism exploitation. Fuck capitalism.
Chuck Tingle's an icon. Okay, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so back on topic.
Yeah, it's very clear that The Shining and It are...
just connected and inspiration one for the other. It's so obvious where he, like, started forming some of those ideas. I really did enjoy the imagery of the wasps. Of it just kind of like... I know that Dick relates it more to hornets, but we know it's supposed to be wasps because that was the thing earlier. Additionally, in On Writing, Stephen King recalls being in his aunt and uncle's, like, garage and accidentally hitting a wasp's nest.
Yeah.
And I think all of it just...
Some people use those terms interchangeably as well.
So it was just such a good, interesting moment. And it is one of those scenes that was so well written as... it's describing this, like, cluster just starting to dissipate, and Dick's just like, well, I mean, it could have been smoke, but it's probably the evil trying to escape this place. Which is interesting because when Bill goes into that space when Bill goes into the space with it and the turtle, it doesn't really get described, I don't think, as, like, having a form. It's just kind of a space that he talks into. And then there's the turtle. Because the two have to coexist at all times, it and the turtle, that is what led me to, like, who exactly does the dim storm cover? Who is calling in the storm at this point? Because every story that we've read has a storm at that climax that lets the evil go blind. Because I believe even the night Andy Dufresne is escaping, there is a storm. Yes. And he literally does need to go dim so he can escape through the prison sewage system.
Yeah.
We know that it is a thing that Flag teaches Tommy how to do.
Yeah.
And that is what happened at the end of it. Big storm comes in, it gets really dim, and nobody can see the losers anymore. And it is in dimness that Tony is able to reach Danny. I don't know if the dimness is more of a description for that evil going blind in that moment. Like, that's what it is, and is it the turtle?
I think what's interesting, too, is the way that dim is this opposite of shining.
Yes.
These are people who kind of naturally shine. Is it that they are going dim, or is it that, like, if I constantly am catching your attention, all I have to do is stop doing that, and your attention will go elsewhere. Or, I mean, I'll catch more of your attention because it'll be, well, what's wrong? But in reality, like, if I'm, like, okay, so speaking of shine, I have a shiny case on my phone. If I'm doing this, and so you're seeing it, if I set it down, it's not dim, but you might think of it as dim because it's not catching your eye anymore. So, if it's more that now this shine isn't happening, that the storm is kind of blocking the ability to, like, sense where the shine is.
Like putting on, like, a shade to a lamp.
Yeah.
You know,
the lamp is still on.
Yeah, and it still shines underneath the shade. If, like, it's looking for a good meal, a dim, like, even if it sees a vague light, it's going to be, like, windy.
Yeah.
Of, like, you shine, but you're not going to be tasty. And it even, like, the Overlook. The Overlook even tells Jack, you know, like, maybe I should have tried your wife.
Yeah.
Because you aren't doing what I want you to do fast enough. Because it negs Jack a lot.
Which is because he's so jealous.
Yes. Oh my God. And of his kid, because it's constantly like, no, it wants me. I'm the one it wants. I'm the chosen one, not Danny, me.
I'm not gonna lie, I had my Jack moment because I felt so validated for I'm like, yes, I read this correctly. I fucking called you from the beginning of the book, like, your true self. Like, they preyed on your bullshit from the beginning of the book, you piece of shit. Like, ugh.
No, it's true.
So validated.
Especially because Jack is smart enough to realize, oh, it's using me. Oh, it's doing this. I know it's doing this, but I can't. I am so addicted to the need for this praise.
Yes.
And this validation that I have value and I'm not a loser.
Yes.
I am strong and useful and better than every fucking other person around me, including my wife and kid. And the management wants me. And he completely destroys his entire life because he is so busy chasing that validation and that high of, like, I have value, because he can't self-validate.
I was gonna say, my therapist would say it's because he can't. He's not doing internal validation.
It's not even like, oh, he's not doing it because he's dumb. He's smart enough to figure out I'm being used. He just doesn't care. And that's pretty sad. But ultimately, he knows what's happening to him. And I think that's what makes that scene with Danny, when Danny is finally able to reach through the false face of Jack. You know, Danny remembers the face of his father.
Yes.
And he's able to reach out to him, and it's just like standing there facing a grown man with a weapon and trying to reach his father. And he manages to make that final contact. And they are able to have that moment before Danny's just like, yeah, okay, I said goodbye to my father. You need to take it yourself out. And I don't want to be looking at my dad's face no more.
Yeah.
So, you ain't my dad.
That was moving. It was sad. But it was lovely. I think that had there not been that moment where his dad was like, you need to run and remember how much I love you. That was lovely. It really brought the tension up more because there wasn't a question about, like, oh, is this Jack? Is this not Jack? Like how much of this is actually how Jack feels. Like, the fact that he had to break through to say anything.
Yes.
Was just...
And that's when, like, Jack becomes it, and it's like an Edgar suit. It's a Jack suit. It was a well-written moment in this book.
Yeah.
And it was one of the best. It is sad. It's a little heartbreaking. But, that is coming from two members of the Dead Dad Club. It was well done. And I think also because Stephen King, obviously at this point, we know Danny is based on his son. Stephen King didn't really have a dad in his life, which is probably part of why all of his characters have such a unique relationship with their fathers.
It was beautiful and it was rough.
Yeah.
That was rough. This entire part of the book was just so well done. Honestly, this whole book was just so well done. I wish it was more like this book. I think that if it was the length of this book, it could be this good.
I think so too. I do think it could use some pruning. I also think that that's why we get those moments that are so good in it, like Eddie in the hospital talking to his mom. Because one thing that, again, I'm going to go back to Stephen King's own admissions of how he writes. He pushes constantly this idea of write honestly. And I think The Shining is one of the most honest pieces of work he ever wrote, at least of what we have read so far. And I think that's where we also got those moments in it of this is honest Stephen King coming out right now, and it's well done and well thought out. The Shining just has so much more of that, and it's more coherent as one string of book. Okay, so Tony is Danny. If you've read this before, if you've kind of watched and everything, you probably already figured this out.
If you've seen Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, so...
Which is how I knew. Ewan McGregor told me.
We are going to be reading Dr. Sleep next, so we're going to get to see how that's maybe more clearly explained, because when we get the reveal of Tony, he is described as kind of looking like some sort of morphed version of Danny, who looks like his parents. But it's not really explained how Tony is reaching to Danny. Danny.
That's how it felt to me.
He's an anamorph.
Yes, exactly.
But that's why the doctor was like, well, you know why he's called his imaginary friend Tony, right? Because the doctor saw what his fucking middle name was. And everybody was just like, yeah, okay, should we tell him that? Doctor says no, so they didn't, and Danny, I guess, never really thought about his name.
Danny is only so smart of a kid.
Yeah, I mean, he's 5. He's pretty, capable for a 5-year-old.
He's presented as both a hyper genius and a moron. That moment where Jack clutches her ankle, that really did feel like it almost felt like the first time Wendy really saw that for what it was. That was pretty incredible. I'm glad I hadn't imagined that as the imagery that it was. The bigger thing, so I am not sure if I missed it elsewhere in the book. In the last section, as he's kind of going crazier and crazier, which I use that term...
As he's being consumed.
Yes, that's better.
That's what I've been kind of going with, is because it consumed Jack.
He makes a comment about... The student's name is George.
The student's name is George.
A comment comes up. I think it's when he sees George as the body in the bathtub.
Mm-hmm.
You tried to hit me when I was on my bike. Is that a reveal?
I'm unclear... Because he is starting to get so influenced, I'm not sure. Because Jack was always really bothered by the fact that they never found a person with the bike.
Yeah.
They never found a person who would have driven it or, ridden it. It's a bike. The bike seemingly was just in the road. Jack wasn't driving that night, at least according to how the story has been told to this point. Al Shockley was driving. And Al Shockley is the one who doesn't want to admit that maybe some sketchy people still own parts of the hotel that he also owns a part of. But yeah, I'm not sure what the situation is with the bike and George. Because he's also having so many, twisted, visions or experiences. Because he is partying with the ghosts now. And also in true It fashion, there is a unpleasant solicitation of a child.
Always.
Yeah.
I was just gonna leave it, honestly.
It just was another one of those things that made me think of it, because obviously what happens with Eddie. But yeah, I'm not sure. I am hoping Dr. Sleep will explain maybe a little bit more.
Okay. I think that's fair. I do keep forgetting that maybe Dr. Sleep will cover some of this.
Oh, and you don't know this yet, so this is a surprise for you as well.
Okay.
I have access to what was either a short story or maybe original early chapters that got cut of The Shining.
Oh, shit.
That I think that we are going to go ahead and read and make that something.
How did this happen?
I found it online.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that the access is still available. It's not a ton, and that's why I can't remember if it was like cut content or if it was just a short story that Stephen King had written in regards to the Torrances prior to going to the Overlook.
Dude, that sounds amazing.
So
hopefully that will answer some questions, because for me that is the part that is still unanswered. What actually happened with this student? Because it is still lingering for me. This whole I don't stutter. I have never stuttered.
And the timer.
Yes, you set the timer for it. Now, I think based on the things that Jack was saying and doing, it is clear that yes, he set the timer forward for his own good because he had a stammer. But the guy says that he never had a stutter. The reason that I bring this up is because you tried to hit me when I was on my bike. Makes me wonder, did he hit him? Could that have caused a stutter? Or could the anxiety of dealing with a teacher who tried to hit you on your bike have caused a stutter?
Yeah.
Or did he just not have one at all, and Jack is so hungover or still drunk the next day that he's imagining a stutter, doesn't want to deal with them, and hates him for having,
And Bill did develop his stutter after being hit by the car.
Did he really?
I think so. I think that was one of the things, is that he didn't stutter before.
That's right. You're right. Yes.
So if George was hit by the car and that actually triggered his stutter.
Yes.
And I don't know. So let's see. What is this? This is Before the Play, prequel to The Shining. So it's just a prequel to The Shining. I don't know what all is in it. We will read it and we will report back.
Will this be main channel, or will this be another thing that you must follow us on Patreon to see?
I might potentially put this on Patreon, but I might go ahead and put it at the just follow us
That's
level.
What I'm saying. Just follow us. You don't have to do anything special. Just, we're not even asking for money. Just follow us.
Just follow us, and you should have access to this and to the movies. There are things that are at the paid levels, but you can access this potentially just for a follow. Just your time and your vague attention. Let us shine at you momentarily.
Yeah. And it's so much easier to connect with us. Maybe you can shine at us a little bit. We'll shine together.
Yep.
And you can, if you do want to give us a little money, we have a rung that's very special to me. It's the Hierophant level, because it's where all my cut rants go.
Yeah.
And that is $5.
That's $5.
That's $5. For $5 a month, you can get all my cut rants.
There's not as many as you might think so far.
Not yet. Okay? But if people start doing it, I'll start ranting more.
And we do have a $1 level, The Magician. I'll just get you a shout on the podcast. Because we value our lobsters, our insectoids.
Yes. Our insect monster lobsters.
Yeah.
Movies, I think.
Well, okay, so final thoughts on The Shining.
It's so good. And I can't wait to sit and do our movie watch now, because that's going to be fucking crazy. That's my final... Like, it's so good. I thought Wendy would have a lot more passive aggression. She really doesn't. She has her own issues, but she seems very aware of them.
She's very focused on taking care of Danny.
Yes, in a way that I deeply approve of. She also doesn't really let Jack walk all over her. She's gentle and kind of quiet about it, but she will fucking fight him. I love her. Like, Wendy is the best. She deserves everything. How dare he have broke her vertebra? And then she's getting better from a broken vertebra. Wendy is the best. She deserves every good thing in life. She gets not nearly enough love in just the world as a fictional character. And I'm so glad that Shelley Duvall played her.
Yeah.
I realized that she was not a blonde. But if we're going to change people at all, that is the change. That is the change we need to see in this world. It's just physically making Wendy into Shelley Duvall. Because that is inspired.
Well,
Wendy is inspired.
Shelley Duvall did such a good job.
Oh my god.
On a slightly related note, I found a person on Etsy that sells patterns to make Jack and Wendy torrents like amigurumi.
Jeez.
Yeah. I don't think they have a Danny. I'm not too concerned about that, but they do have a Jack and Wendy, which I thought was cute.
Yeah.
So.
What are your final thoughts?
I thought this was really good. It is definitely, I think, the strongest book we have read to date. I am looking forward to Dr. Sleep. I really am excited to get into that one and see how it is. And I'm interested in reading this prequel, short story. Because I have not read it. I don't know what it is. I happened to come across it from somebody. I think they had posted about it on Reddit. So I went and sought it out, found it, and I am looking forward to actually reading what this is.
I am too. I'm really excited. And it's for sure Stephen King. It's not like a fan fiction.
It is for sure Stephen King. It was a thing that...
Okay.
They, for some reason, opted not to include anymore.
So I will tell everybody, I don't like surprises. Hate surprises. This is a good surprise. These are the kind of... Kat knows me well enough. This is the kind of surprise I enjoy. This is a good surprise.
So look for that on Patreon. Our next reading is going to be starting Dr. Sleep. So a couple of things here. Before we get into, pulling our card and everything. So, first of all, January's coming and we will probably be taking January off. But that being said, due to the magic of recording and editing and the fact that I've only divided Dr. Sleep into 3 episodes, 3 parts, because there's 3 parts to the book, there actually will be an episode early January. So you may only have to deal with half of a January off because we have the time to read and record and create those episodes between now and then. Next reading part is Dr. Sleep, part 1. And that'll come out at the beginning of December. We'll do part 2 for Christmas, apparently. It's going to come out on Christmas. And then part 3 will actually come out at the beginning of January before we take our break. It will be the last thing before we go dark for the month. Plans can change. Things might happen. But I think... as of right now, where we're sitting at, things look good and we can totally make this happen. And you'll get an extra episode out of us to make up for maybe some times when we've gone dark because I just couldn't get it together.
Or because I was dead or dying, legitimately dying. Well, last time we pulled the 4 of Pentacles. Did you know that?
I did.
I wrote it down. I remembered.
Woo! And what does the 4 of Pentacles mean?
I wrote down that we pulled it, okay? I didn't know it's about what it was.
Well, then let me tell people before we go into the new one. So the 4 of Pentacles is a sign of conservation, indicating substantial material possession and could reveal protective tendencies.
Wow. That made a lot of sense for the end of that book.
It really did. So far... cards have been on point.
Well, going into Dr. Sleep, I've pulled the 5 of Cups.
Ooh, we've gotten this one before. The sad guy, right?
Yes. The Five of Cups depicts a figure who is sad. They are turned away from from you looking at the card.
And he always...
Three of the cups are lying on the ground turned over. 2 of the cups are behind the person on the card. And the person on the card is wearing a cloak and is, like, turned away from you. And there's also, like, a river in the background. Like, this is kind of a sick card. But yeah, sorry.
And it always, with us, tends to get confused at first with the Hermit, because it looks so similar.
Yeah.
But then, like, when you really look at it, it doesn't. It just has, like, that at-a-glance power.
So, funnily enough, pulling it this time, I actually thought it was the Death card. Which, I have no idea what the Death card looks like from this deck. I don't know why, just immediately I thought, like, oh, I pulled Death. But, like, that was what I had thought, I think, because the Black Cloak.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my god, I pulled Death. So, Death doesn't mean it's not a terrible card, but I more thought, like, that would be very cool going into Dr. Sleep to have pulled Death. But I didn't. I pulled the Five of Cups.
If you remember from the many other times we have pulled the Five of Cups, it symbolizes disappointment and regret with an unexpected outcome. And it indicates the need to move on, which... From having watched Dr. Sleep, that sounds like it's gonna be really on point.
I feel like these cards at first were like, oh, like, we're supposed to be talking about you two, right? When we first started pulling from them, like, the cards were reading us, but, like, the more that we've done the podcast, the cards have gotten with it. Like, they get it. And they're like, oh, you just want for your fucking little podcast, fine. Here... generic bullshit for your podcast. But yeah, that does sound pretty good.
Alright, so I'm repeating once again. We are reading the first part of Dr. Sleep. When you get to part 2, Empty Devils, stop. I mean, you can read whatever you want. You're adults, probably. Hopefully, you're adults.
She's telling me, when you get to part 2, Empty Devils?
Empty Devils.
Empty Devils.
Stop. So...
The rest of you can go on, but if I keep going, I'll accidentally talk about stuff.
Yeah.
I don't get to. Which means you all can go on and find other worlds. I don't get to do that either. I'll talk about them.
We're gonna hope that we get to find some other ones, though. I mean, like...
Can we just find one other world?
This one's pretty rough right now.
I don't super love this one.
Yeah.
It's not great for you, and it's certainly not great for me.
Yeah. Find yourself a world where you are safe and protected and loved and free to...
If you...
do things that don't harm anybody, but, like, free to be yourself.
If you're in the Reno Sparks area and you are transgender and you need help with resources or anything of that nature, please leave us a comment.
Yep.
Because I know everything.
We will throw down for you. We will Karen for you. We will mom friend you.
Oh, yes.
We will make sure that you are taking care of baby lobsters. Our little cow babies.
Yes, cow babies.
You are safe and protected under our umbrella.
I will never have children of my own, so I will only have dog babies and lobster babies.
And we are proud of you, and it's going to be okay.
Okay, bye.
You can email us at manyconstantworlds@gmail.com, DM us on Instagram, and check out our Patreon. All links can be found in the description of our episodes.
We work really hard for the Patreon, and Megan gets mad if we don't say that.
We work hard for that money.
so hard for that money.